My mothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we started our series of majalis yesterday with the topic Finding Peace in an Imperfect World, Balancing Acceptance, Action and Hope. And we began by talking about the importance of intentions, about how when we set an intention, it actually changes the action, it changes how we show up in the world. Then we spent quite a bit of time on verse 20 from Surah Hadith, where we talked about Allah is telling us the nature of our distractions in this world, depending on the stage of maturity which we're at, beginning from the time when we are babies, right up to the time of young adulthood. And then, in case we begin to think that this world is an evil place and we should have no place in it, we went through in detail a hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam where he tells us that in essence, the world is not deceiving us. It's giving us lessons every single day. And it is up to us whether if you're awake, we will get the lessons. And if you're not awake, we're not going to get the lessons, right? So again, beginning with an intention, the first intention is to stay awake. Awake in the sense of alert, mindful of where we are, why we are here, and where we're going. And we talked about the idea of using the metaphor of a traveler through this earth, right? That if we are in a short place, if you're in a lovely place for a short amount of time, we generally don't forget our purpose. We use that place, we enjoy it, but we know that our destination is somewhere else. And I requested, and I will request again, that it really helps all of us when people message and say what they're taking away, what they're committed to, what is making sense. And there were some questions about how to contact me. The best way is via email. If you WhatsApp me, you're not likely to get a response, especially if it's not, and I'm just being very honest. So email is the best way, and it is livingthequran786@gmail.com. livingthequran786@gmail.com. So moving on, today we are going to be talking about the state of mental health in this world today. Given that our topic is finding peace, it makes sense that we actually kind of do a survey and see where we are, what is working, what is not working, and really understand what we mean by pursuing peace. What are we looking for? We always talk about happiness, and do we even understand what happiness is? So what is the modern concept of happiness? Is it really working? And we will spend a little bit of time talking about some reasons. It's a very large topic, but some reasons why our current understanding, our current pursuit of happiness may not be bringing us what we want. Okay? And then we will end today, inshallah, with God's tawfiq, with some beginning introduction of what Quran talks about peace, sakina, happiness in the Quran, right? And so let's begin with the salawat. So we know that man has always searched for, we've always yearned for peace. We've always yearned for happiness. Since time immemorial, philosophers, wisdom masters have always talked about this concept, okay? But what is different in the modern world is that the life that we are leading today, the life of the body, that is, would be a dream to our ancestors. You know what I mean? Like we have more wealth today, and it doesn't matter how much wealth you have. You have more wealth. We have more wealth as a community, as an individual, as a society than ever before in the history of mankind. Okay, so that's one thing. We, through advance in science, we have been able to control nature. True? So before, for example, if a tsunami came or an earthquake came, things would be pretty destroyed, right? That whole society would be gone. But now through science, we have actually learned how to control it. So we built, for example, earthquake-proof houses. We have ways to protect ourselves. We build shelters that will actually give us that security from the elements, okay? We've learned to deal with sickness as well. Right? So human beings are staying, things that could have killed somebody in the past, very early on, does not kill us today. I mean, some people would argue that we just remain sick, at a low level of sickness for a very long time. But in any case, reality is that, heart disease, diabetes, all of these things are not killing people at the rate they used to. The lifespan is longer than, for example, our ancestors may have had. And we have a lot of comforts, right? We have so much comfort available to us. For example, just the idea of, saving devices, labor-saving devices in the home. Previously, like, our grandmothers, for example, would probably spend the whole day just cleaning because they didn't have a vacuum cleaner. They didn't have all the things we do today, dishwashers, right? I remember when I got married many years ago, dishwashers weren't such a big, they weren't that common. And I was in Pakistan. And when I told somebody that, she was like, how are you going to do without help, right? This was like the ultimate tragedy for someone coming from a life of luxury, right? And I said, it's okay, we have dishwashers. It's okay, like I'll manage. So, we have all of these labor-saving devices. However, given that that mankind is always searching for peace, always searching for happiness, one would think that with all the material advancements in our life, we would be happier, right? Doesn't that make sense? And has that ever concerned you? Has that question ever, crossed your mind that we have so much progress in the world, but the human beings don't seem to be any happier? In fact, many would argue it's the opposite. So there's a very good book by Syed Mushtaba Lari, and it's written in 1974, but I believe it's actually more relevant today than it was even then. He says, in spite of possessing all the different means essential for a better life, man today not only does not possess the feeling of mental peace and security that are basic for a happy life, he is drifting further away from the goal of a pleasant and wholesome life. From the viewpoint of peace and happiness, the future prospects of this material life today are not promising. Then he goes on to say, it cannot be denied that in most advanced societies, psychological stress and anxiety have constantly increased in direct proportion to scientific, industrial, and economic progress. What is he saying? He's saying the more we do better physically, the more we progress, quote unquote, as a society, we are not getting happier. We are actually getting more miserable, right? And this, and he goes on to say, and the increase in psychic problems, the corresponding increase in the number of psychotherapists and psychiatrists has not at all helped to meet the situation. In other words, people like me, when I first started in this field many, many years ago, there were a handful of Muslim psychotherapists, very, very few. And today, mashallah, like the field is booming, right? There's so many of us, and still the need is even greater and greater and greater. Okay? So, and he really is onto something, because when study after study comes out talking about the mental health, people, happiness, depression, anxiety, it's off the charts. It's not only that we are experiencing it, it is a worldwide phenomenon. And especially for our youth, it has come to a crisis level. Crisis level. In other words, it is now more rare to see a home with several teenagers where one or more is not suffering from anxiety, depression, OCD, or a number of mental health issues. Okay? So what is happening? We need to take this very seriously. And, so I used to think that maybe it is the lack of social services. We know that poverty, we used to think in the old days that poverty is very highly related to mental illness. Why? Because when you don't have basic needs of your life, you can't focus on self-growth, you can't focus on happiness, you're just busy surviving. But this has not come true in this world. The happiest societies, in fact, are amongst the poorest. Bangladesh ranks very high on the happiness scale compared to other industrialized societies of the world. I used to always think, the Nordic societies, right? Denmark, other names are escaping me right now, Finland, Sweden, all of these, they have the highest level of social service you can imagine. So I used to think, okay, that's something to follow. They're doing so well looking after their communities. Certainly people there must be happy. It turns out they also have among the highest rates of suicide. So what is going on, right? What is going on? And, of course, this is a really deep subject. So today we just like literally, skim the surface to give us a little bit of understanding, because this is something really important. The basis of understanding where we are going wrong is extremely important, because all of us, whether anyone who's on social media here, right? We are all impacted by this kind of what has been called the happiness trap. Searching for happiness in the wrong places and doing things which are actually worsening our mental health rather than increasing it. Okay. So it's really important. It's really important for the young people to know. It's really important for us to know. So I'm going to give you some examples, and I'm going to try, if you're not understanding anything, just like pick up your hand and say, please, let's get practical. Okay. Because we need a little bit of theory. So there are two words for happiness, which we need to understand. In the past, the term used for happiness was something called eudaimonia. Eudaimonia means what? It was a life lived for the spirit, for virtue. A life well lived when you did your best, when you fulfilled the potential within you, was called the life worth living, and it was a life of virtue. And for example, Aristotle writes, but what is happiness? If we consider what the function of man is, we find that happiness is a virtuous activity of the soul. A virtuous activity of the soul. The profession of psychotherapy, in fact, started out as a study of the soul. Nowadays, like you're not, in most things, you're not even allowed to address the soul. You're not allowed to address religion unless you are in a very informed, enlightened kind of organization, right? So, in fact, it comes from the Greek word meaning the healing medical treatment of the spirit. So it was always meant to be addressing what is actually real within us, okay? However, somewhere along the way, and there are a lot of theories on when it started, but let's say the industrial movement, capitalism, all of that. Okay? Suddenly, over time, what happened was that people began to focus on personal happiness. It's me, no one needs to tell me what to do. I can make my own decisions. And again, this is why I think our young people really need to be very aware when they're engaging the social media, because it is, everything that we consume has an impact on us. And a lot of it, by the way, when you consume things on screen, it's very unconscious, right? We don't realize what is going in, and it becomes a part of our psyche. Okay. So and I just do this for work, right? Like, this is very entertaining to me to see what social media is telling human beings, right? Find your own path. You deserve the best. Don't settle for less. You're the queen. Have you guys come across all of this, right? So, and I just think, who is going to be in relationship with these queens, right? The thing is that because on the other hand, there are also princes and kings being raised, right? And when the kings and queens meet, it's a big problem, because both people are the center of the world. Both people. They're used to finding their own path, doing their own thing, personal happiness over everything else, right? So, instead of having God at the center, which, even eudaimonia, that's the one thing missing from it, but say, principle, let's say principle, right? It was the principle, it was the soul, it was the spirit, that got taken out. And by the way, you can understand all of modern ailments with this one little example, right? That instead of having a life with principle, God in the center, we took it out and we put the human being in the center. Now, when the human being is in the center, there are some problems with that, okay? What are some of the problems? Any ideas? Ego, definitely. But more than that, right? It's not even like a personal defect. Human knowledge is evolving. We have made, like, if you just look at history in the last 50 years, human beings have made so many mistakes. So many mistakes, right? I mean, I've given this example. If you've heard me, I'm sure you've heard it before, but I will say it again. So when my, two older children were born, there's 2.5 years between them. Okay. When my older child was born, I was told, whatever you do, you have to leave the child sleeping on their stomach, because if you don't, there's a very high risk of cord death, right? I don't know, people who have older kids may have also heard this. Okay. Fair enough. And of course, doesn't matter what Islam told us, doesn't matter what the sleeping recommendations were. When a doctor tells you that, the nurses tell you that, as a young mother, you're kind of scared, right? So you follow them. Now, fast forward 2.5 years later. 2.5 years later, same hospital, same doctor, same team. What do they tell me? Whatever you do, do not put the child to sleep on your stomach. And I'm like, hello, did the body change? Like, what happened? Right? And still, human beings are so egoistic that they don't get it. They don't get that the information is not complete. What we know today is different from what we knew even 10 years ago. And 10 years following, it will still be different. So to put God, ourselves, in charge of our own destiny is kind of scary, isn't it? Like, we're not meant to kind of figure it all out on ourselves. That's why we have divine guidance. Okay? So whether it is mental health, whether it is gender identity, whether it is anything, human knowledge is evolving, it's changing, it's often wrong. And then what happens? People, like, what do we do to people? We have done so much zulm in the name of progress and, science and, correcting people and all of that, right? But human beings, it seems, don't really learn. We keep making the same mistakes again and again. So this is the big difference, right? Between eudaimonia, which is the study of the good soul, which is living the good life, which is living the life of virtue, whereas compared to what happiness has been reduced to in today's term, which is something called hedonia. What is it? Hedonia. It's very important to remember this word. Now, the thing with hedonia, like, if you think about happiness, nobody will talk about hedonia. They just say happiness, right? What do they tell you? What are the messages that you get in being happy? Somebody's talking on the phone. No. Okay, if people on Zoom could actually shut off their mics, that would be amazing. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, I don't know how to do that. But in any case, my question was, if somebody told you how to be, like, if somebody asked you, right, a friend, I want to be happy, how should I be happy? Sorry? Okay, great. Yes, doing things you love. That's a big one, right? Self-love. Oh my God, the big, like a buzzword, self-love. Like, this is our biggest focus these days. Yes, we have. Okay, good. Try and be with people who makes you, that's a very important one. And that's actually really does work. Okay, great. Relationships, right? What else? Self-compassion. Okay, what else?
If you're not responsible for walking things and walk the full walk yourself, if you are accepted, that's one place.
Yes, absolutely. So what I'm talking about is, what does the social media and what does the current psychology tell us? Did you have your hand up? Sorry, say that again. Ibadat, absolutely. And does Instagram tell you that? Probably not. And you're probably not on Instagram. Okay, good. Yeah. Contentment, right? And what is contentment? So again, there.
Sorry, what is it?
Okay, be satisfied, absolutely. And if you go on Instagram, it's usually about take a spa day, you know. Have you not come across messages as find your own path, seek your own truth, right? You don't have to listen to anybody else. If somebody's treating you badly, boundaries. The biggest buzzword is what? Set boundaries, right? Cut people off. Like and there are some young people today, so I would say this. What is very, very disturbing and saddening to me is this current trend that we have in therapy, in like in Desi therapy, in Brown therapy, specifically in Muslim therapy, is dealing with the traumas left by our parents. Okay? And, there's two sides to it. I'm not denying that we as a generation, talking about myself, we have done quite a bit of, we didn't know better, okay? And, it's gone a bit far. It's gone a bit far because I think the missing element for young people today is not recognizing the heart of a parent, right? At how much grief a child can cause a parent. And it's not the same thing. Okay, it is not the same thing. And that's why, by the way, God in his infinite knowledge, if you think about it, when you think about where the responsibility is placed, responsibility and instinct are divided. Let me explain that. Who's responsible for the children, man or the woman? No, in Islam, who is, sorry? Man, okay. And who has the instinct? Okay. In parent and child relationship, who has the obligation?
Father.
No. Between grown parents and children, who has the obligation? Children, 100%. But who has the instinct? The parents, right? So Allah's design is perfect. He puts obligation where the instinct is not, right? But when you are finding your own path, when you are not, when you believe that you know better than God, right? This is, in my family, this is the standard saying is you're not smarter than God, right? So when we try to kind of reinvent the wheel, this is why we go really wrong. Okay, now I've gotten a little bit off topic, but some of the reasons why the modern pursuit of happiness is not working. So let's go to the Quran. In Surah Balad, verse 4, which many of us are familiar with, Allah says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. So, in other words, man has been created in distress. Now, there's many ways that ulama explain this, but generally what this means is that the struggle of the higher self and the lower self. So we know that human beings have two kind of inclinations, right? We have our nafs, our lower self, which if you understand, it's not, I often like to say, it's not a design flaw. The nafs has a very important purpose, and that purpose is to keep us alive. It's to keep us alive. Because if we were not alive, if we did not have that survival instinct, if we did not have that negative inclination, we could not survive to kind of have the struggle and live up to our full potential and all of that, right? So the lower self has a very important purpose. However, we are not meant to kind of stay there. The struggle is that we manifest our higher self as much as possible in this life, okay? Now, when we do that, in this struggle, there will absolutely not only be challenges, there will be negative emotions. Do you know what I mean? So, for example, if you're in a relationship, somebody's giving you a hard time, will you feel upset? Absolutely. Will you feel anger? Yes. Will you feel resentment? Yes. Will you feel jealousy at times? Yes. You will feel all of these things, right? Now, the problem is that in modern life, people or society or the culture does not have any room for negative emotions. Good vibes only. Have you heard that? Yeah. Right. Positive thinking. Have you heard that? I mean, that's like my pet peeve. Inshallah, we will do a whole session on that at some point. But toxic positivity has done a lot of harm. Okay. Emotions are a very important part. I don't know, some of you may have heard, we did a whole series at Nurjayapa's house on the emotions in the Quran. Okay. So when life gives us a variety of emotions, we think, what? Something's gone wrong. I shouldn't be having these emotions. And then the second reason is that we have something called hedonic adaptation. So, we keep wanting more and more, like in terms of material things, in terms of comfort. But the problem is that the human psyche gets very easily used to something. So let me give you an example. Say, you work for a big corporation, up to now, you've only been flying economy. And as a perk of your work, you suddenly start flying business. The first 2 times you fly it, it will feel amazing, right? Wow, this is such luxury. What about the 4th, 5th, 6th time? Okay. Then what happens? You start complaining. You start comparing one airline seat to the other. You know what I'm saying? That is called hedonic adaptation. Hedonic, a fancy name, it only means that you get used to luxury very easily. Then once you get upgraded to first class, right? Kya baat hai? Now I cannot settle for anything less, right? So you see what I'm saying? That the chase for materialism, and that's why Imam Ali alayhi salam says that drinking of the world is like drinking from a salty sea. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. In other words, you will have to continuously upgrade your standards in order to have the same level of satisfaction. Not more, same. And inshallah, we'll do a whole session on this. This is not inevitable, by the way. There's a very big, huge, big tool that we have in order to kind of manage this, okay? And so the third important point is that when we experience pain in life, we kind of activate what has been called our struggle switch. What is the struggle switch, right? So, this idea that pain is a part of life. While we are alive, we will experience challenge of many different types. And if we have not experienced it as yet, we will. That's just the nature of time on this planet. True? Okay. So that is kind of a given. The problem is that when something happens, when challenge happens, we don't accept it. We complain about it. We struggle with the idea that we are in a challenging situation, right? So many things have been written on it. In Buddhism, this is called the first arrow or the first dart or the second dart. In other words, the first dart happens. Say, for example, I break my knee. Okay, so that is the first dart. It is pain, very much, a lot of physical pain. Now what happens is that every single morning, I remind myself of how unfair life is. That I have a broken knee. Here are all the things I can't do. I become the most boring person on earth. Because you meet me and what do I talk about? My knee, right? This becomes kind of my identity. Oh my God, I'm in so much pain, right? So now what we're doing, and I'm sorry for everybody who has seen it. I'm literally only talking about myself right now, okay? So the thing is that the pain is there. The problem is not the pain, because Allah has told us we are in, one or the other. If we don't have pain that people can see, we have things we can't even talk about, right? So all of us have pain in our lives. The problem happens that we start throwing second and third darts on that pain, right? So, and by the way, there's a beautiful hadith of Imam Kazim alayhi salam. So he says the catastrophe is but a single one for the patient man, a single one. In other words, I have knee pain. And 2 for the anxious one. In other words, I have knee pain and now I'm having feelings about my pain, right? I'm telling myself all the time, it shouldn't be there. I'm fighting with it. I'm not accepting reality, all of that, okay? And by the way, this does not mean we don't attend to the pain. Actually, we have to attend to the pain. This is not about that, right? In fact, The problem is not that, the problem is often that we don't attend to the pain. Let me explain. Say I go to the doctor and for my knee pain, right? And the doctor tells me, what? You broke your knee? How careless of you. What an idiotic thing to do. Oh, your child left a toy on the road, on the floor. How careless of them, blah, 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 right? Oh, your mother-in-law screamed at you and that's why you're upset and you broke your knee. How, mean of her, right? So I'm saying, hello, like, can you please attend to my knee? Right? It's hurting. But please notice how we do this in our own lives. Please notice this. We all do it. When someone has hurt us, right? Somebody says something, it upsets us. Instead of tending to the wound, right? Ouch, that hurts. Ouch. It's just fine. Absolutely fine, right? What do? They shouldn't have done this. Why? Like the amount of people that go to therapy for fixing other people is just amazing. And the first bad news that has to give them is, I'm sorry, I can't even change my own family. Like, how can I help you? Right? The thing is that when we are hurt, this is a part of life. Self-compassion, tending to the wound, doing what we can to make our lives better is absolutely okay. Finding people to blame others or ourselves. How much time do we spend on self-criticism? And we think, by the way, that we're doing something good. For some reason, we have mistaken doing the right thing by this ridiculous guilt, which actually doesn't get us anywhere. So, a lot of mothers have guilt, right? We kind of born with it. The question to ask ourselves is that making me a better mother? Really? Is that making me a better mother? Or is it just beating up upon myself? So again, say if I went to the doctor with my broken knee, right? And he actually took a stick and beat it more. Would that help? And yet that's what we do to ourselves all the time. We are hurting. Why am I hurting? I shouldn't be hurting. Why is this upsetting me? It shouldn't be upsetting. I should be more positive. You are not going to get more positive by being negative on yourself. Like, that's just not how it works. So what is the message here? The message is, if we are hurting, accept that this is a part of life. Don't make it worse by having feelings about your feelings, by having feelings about your pain. So now, say I'm going through anxiety, okay? I'm very anxious, and inshallah, we'll talk more about that. But now I'm depressed that I'm anxious. I'm angry. Why is God giving me this anxiety, right? Just be anxious and then move on. You know what I mean? Just stop at the anxiety rather than adding more feelings to the anxiety. Is this making sense? Okay. So this is what we call the happiness trap, right? That we are, instead of just having pain, we are adding resistance to the pain. Okay. We are finding people to blame, if not somebody else, then ourselves, right? Our history. And this is why I find it so challenging, right? When I see these things on social media by therapists, by brown Muslim therapists, on how it's all the parents' fault. The thing is, in Islam, we are literally responsible for ourselves. Our history, Allah will deal with, and that's why, by the way, the beautiful dua about and sahifa, right, for parents is so beautiful that if they have missed some obligation, right, on me, like, use that to forgive me. And if I have missed any obligation, then use that to forgive them, right? So in other words, whatever pain we go through has a bigger purpose. That's Allah's job. Let's not spoil our today by kind of focusing on things that we cannot control and making it worse, right? Making the pain worse by adding second and third darts to it. So, again, there's a metaphor about quicksand, right? Does anyone know what you do when you fall in quicksand?
Don't struggle.
You don't struggle. Number one thing, what you do, you just lay flat, float, and let it be, right? What will happen if you struggle? You sink. Exactly. Same kind of idea. Okay. So in summary, pain guaranteed, suffering optional. Suffering is optional. Okay. And I think let's, talking about peace in the Quran, I'll just do maybe one and then we can continue it tomorrow. So the Quran talks about peace as aman, he talks about peace as sukoon, he talks about peace as something that is granted, that's something that he brings down on the hearts of believers, right? The first thing, the first verse that I've chosen here is chapter 10, verse 25, where Allah said, Wallahu yadu ila daris salam. He is inviting you to a place of peace and guides whom he pleases into the right path. In other words, the ultimate security, the ultimate taskin, the ultimate sukoon is by following his path. Why? Even from a modern perspective, we can understand this, right? That human knowledge, its history has shown us that human beings make mistakes. So we need something on a higher plane in order to make it, in order to kind of not fall down the same level. So inshallah, we will continue the conversation tomorrow.